garbage box.
But John, here's what's fascinating about the Supreme Court's analysis in this decision. When you talk about the individual, most of the early analysis in this case dealt with the treatment of slaves before the Civil War and with freed slaves after the Civil War, which I find absolutely fascinating because the way that our ancestors was treated is what gave us the Supreme Court's ruling yesterday. And when they talked about individuals, there was a question post-Civil War about whether or not freed slaves, men in particular, would have the right to bear arms, as other individuals did. And from that, Justice Scalia and the majority of the court deigned that individuals unconnected with militias always had the right to bear arms.
You know, the most interesting thing about this decision, John, is that the unanimity of the city officials in the District of Columbia so angry about it, saying they were against this decision. And their constituents are very divided over this. There are a lot of people in Washington who said, I'm going out as soon as I can to get me a gun so I can protect myself because I'm worried about the crime in this town. There was one fellow quoted in the Washington Post who said, I moved out to Fort Washington, Maryland in Prince George.
I think I know what it is, Derek.
Michelle.
We don't know what Obama's position is. I think he's straddling the fence, and he has represented.
You did the show, Michelle, where we got into Obama's attitude towards the Supreme Court, the criteria he was going to use, work from the heart, relate to the people, not discretion. Don't you remember that show?
No, I don't.
We're going to have you more often. Well, you finish your point.
But what I was going to say was the Supreme Court does not readily overturn precedent. So regardless of who the next president is and regardless of who they appoint to the Supreme Court and who steps down, we're not going to see this case overturned in the next 100 years. It does not happen often. People think that you just go to the Supreme Court and you overturn a case, and that's not the way this country works.
But here's the difficulty, and Pat is absolutely right that John McCain should be making this a crucial centerpiece of his campaign. These votes are coming down by the Supreme Court 5-4, whether it's extending constitutional rights and privileges to the terrorist suspects at Guantanamo Bay, the child rape case that came down this week, and this on guns. The balance is very delicate. You've got one swing vote. It depends on how many vacancies there are. There may be more than...
Question, is speculation driving up the cost of oil and gas? I ask you, Michelle.
No. I think this is an absurdity. Maybe it has a little bit to do with the price of gas, but speculators operate in a free market system. They're either going to win big or they're going to lose big. They can absolutely go broke. This is a question of supply and demand and what we see happening in emerging markets. If you look at China, if you look at India, these are emerging nations, and they're using just as much oil as we are, if not more. Right. And if there is less supply, then the price of oil is going to go higher.
If they bet, for example, that the current price of a barrel of oil, which is about $142, will go up, they could lose their shirt.
Sure,
That's
John.
right.
This could be, they could be
John,
peaking now.
I was down in Texas, Midland, Odessa.